Bun găsit la Zilele Aniversare Litera, un festival cu mulți autori străini. Vorbim astă seară cu Virginia Feito, o scriitoare foarte interesantă care a publicat de curând la Editura Litera un roman, un thriller psihologic foarte bun care se numește La Limită. Hello, good evening, Virginia Feito.
Hi, thank you. Hi, good evening.
Thank you so much for having accepted our invitation and for participating in this festival. It's the anniversary festival of our publishing house, Litera Anniversary Festival, and we are very happy to welcome you here. And your amazing book.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's an honor to be here with celebrating Litera's anniversary, so thank you.
Thank you on behalf of your readers and on behalf of the publishing house and on my behalf as well. And also I have to say that your novel, which is Mrs. March, the original title, is going very well, and it's very well received by your readers, by your Romanian readers as well. And I don't know if you know, but the Romanian title is a bit different.
Yep.
It's called La Limită, to the limit.
Yeah,
which is quite a situation in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the only country so far that's changed the title. So it's kind of exciting. I don't know. I thought it was kind of cool. And it sounds pretty good as well. I mean, it could sound like a Bruce Willis movie, but it could sound like a psychological thriller. I get where I understand how they came to the title. Yeah.
Well, it's true that everybody or almost everybody dies hard in the end in your book.
There is a death. Yep.
Yes. Well, we won't mention it. Actually, we know from the very beginning where things are going, but that's the fun of it.
I'd say so. Yeah, I think I was laying the seeds of clues throughout the novel. I think so the reader knows it's not going to end well. Yeah.
Okay, but it goes very well, and that's the thrill of it. It's pun intended, because it's a thriller, and it's a psychological thriller, which is very, very difficult to write. So how did you get this idea, and how did you craft it around this very intriguing character, the unreliable narrator, who is Mrs. March? Who is actually Mrs. March?
That's the question the book is trying to answer. I think I wanted to write a thriller where I would give out clues to a mystery, but instead of being a crime or a murder or whatever, the mystery is the character. It's who she is, which is why I don't give her a first name. She's Mrs. March, and her first name only comes out when the real her comes out at the end. So I got this idea. I remember I worked in advertising. I worked in an advertising agency in Madrid, and it was nearing Christmas. And right before Christmas, I always get into Christmas mode. I love Christmas. I'm obsessed with Christmas. So I'll start watching or reading A Christmas Carol, and I'll start listening to The Nutcracker a lot, like compulsively. So I was listening to the overture for The Nutcracker, which is a very cute kind of tune, like optimistic, but there's also like a layer of hysteria, underneath. Like it's a little bit too happy. So I just imagined, the image just came to me of a woman walking down the street. She was wearing a fur coat and one of those purses that you can't put over your shoulder, so you have to carry it on your wrist. And she was just walking down the street, and I could tell that this was a very anxious woman, just kind of like the music, all really optimistic, a little bit hysterical. And that's all I had to begin with. And I think I wrote the first few pages where Mrs. March is just walking down the street, basically, and it's Christmas. And that was the beginning of it. But it wasn't until I rewatched the movie The Hours, and the scene where Meryl Streep goes into a flower shop, and the woman at the flower shop says something like, your friend, because her friend is Ed Harris, is an author. Your friend wrote a book and you're in the book. He based the character on you, something like that. And she says it in a very sinister way, which makes Meryl Streep freak out a little bit, I feel like. And so I basically, I plagiarized that scene for the plot of Mrs. March, and that's how I came up with the plot. I just copied it, basically.
Well, that's true that there are many echoes of Mrs. Dalloway in your book. And also I thought while reading it that maybe the first line could have been that Mrs. March said that she would buy the macarons herself. So.
I did. I think I winked at that a little bit further down. There's a chapter where she's planning a party and she buys the flowers herself. yeah, there's a little wink to that.
Well, the macarons or macaron in French, the good pronunciation of their name are better than the flowers that mixes.
I mean, yeah, they're all good, but yeah, you can only eat one of them, so those are better.
So Mrs. March came to you as an idea fully formed, and she's quite intriguing because she has good traits and bad traits just like everybody, and that makes her special and also common at the same time. Therefore popular to the reader, because you can identify with her at the same time loathing her. That's why I'm saying that she's a very, very well-crafted, unreliable narrator. So in the vein of, I don't know, Humbert or somebody like
yeah, she's a very I mean, to be honest, I don't like her very much. So as you know, as a person, as a character, I think she's great, and she was a lot of fun to write. But I definitely knew I wanted to create a character I didn't like very much, just because as a reader, those are the characters that I most like, and also as an audience, you know, when I'm watching a movie or a TV show, I feel most drawn to unlikable characters. I think they're the most fascinating. But yeah, as you said, there's a lot of her that I think we all have, or at least I have. And that was kind of my way of doing therapy. I just gave her a few of the characteristics that I hate in myself, and then I just exaggerated them, and I didn't give her anything good, I think. No sense of humor. Yeah, but I think I thought it was easier to create a plot from a character that was gray, like that dabbled in a lot of gray areas, a lot of unlikable, complex characteristics, rather than a happy character. Which, I mean, I love The Sound of Music as well. But I like the Nazis in The Sound of Music as well. I think that's what really makes the movie interesting. So
the evil characters. Actually, I was about to say before, when you mentioned the Nutcracker, that the sugar plums, all the sugar plums in the world would disagree with you. It's not hysterical, and it's not mean, and it's not annoying.
That's true. That's true. But there are some scary parts in the Nutcracker. I mean, there are giant rats. I mean, how scary can it get? I think that's pretty dark. So there is a part where it's scary. And then when the Christmas tree grows big, that always freaked me out as a child. And losing sense of what's real and what's not, which is also in the book. So, you know, I'd have to talk to these sugar plum people.
Well, yet you keep seeing it or listening to it every year around Christmas. So
absolutely. It's going to get weirder every time I listen to it. I'm just going to find the dark in it every time.
Well, this is a great mixture in a thriller, in a psychological thriller. And I remember I was reading a review of your book from The Observer, I think, from last September. And the author was saying that, the journalist was saying that there is this gap in psychological thrillers, which you master very well here, between what you perceive, the appearance of somebody, and what can lurk beneath. And that's true for everybody, to be honest, in writing or in real life.
Yeah.
And Hitchcock was a master at exploiting this, because you never know what happens behind the closed doors, what happens in somebody's mind while they are talking to you. This is no hint.
Right. Yeah.
No.
Do you have a knife? Do you have like a child with a knife?
No. Nothing behind the curtain. Just
I'm sure there's a person behind the curtain.
No, but it's fascinating that the tension of the book is held at the same level all throughout, and that's very, very important for such a book. And congratulations on achieving it, especially for a debut. It's your first novel.
Yeah, I had no clue what I was doing. So
you've set the standards for yourself pretty high. So
I know. I'm writing a second one now, and I'm like, why, God, why? I don't know what I did. I don't know how to recreate it. So I'll just try to write something completely different, so people can just hate it. But thank you. I think I'm a very tense person myself. I'm a very anxious, obsessive person. So a lot of people have told me, like a lot of friends have told me when they read it, like, it's like being in your head for just every day. And I'm like, great, I think. But yeah, I think it was my revenge. Like, come into my head. You love it here.
It's like being John Malkovich, but
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, yeah. Well, so she came to you, as you said, just like a vision, walking down the sidewalk,
walking down the street.
Before Christmas. And then what happens to her? Actually, it's a very subtle dance between the exploration of a mental disease. Actually, we don't know for sure what's happening, and then something becoming out of focus. So it's quite blurry at times, but it's also funny. And this is very, very interesting as well. What happens to Mrs. March? And actually, what's the stake of the plot?
Okay.
What did you want to achieve with this progression, besides writing very good prose and keeping the reader entertained, which you did?
I think, thank you. I've always been fascinated by human beings and how we form different personalities from different traumas that have happened to us. And it fascinates me how we are not aware, maybe as we're living a certain experience, that it's going to create a part of ourselves that we're going to have forever. And how it surprises me as well, especially being a very obsessive person, as I've said, how people are obsessed with such different things. Obsession as a theme is something that obsesses me, and how everyone picks a different thing to obsess over, which to somebody else might seem ridiculous, but to somebody it can mean the whole world, and how that ties to their personality and to their values and the decisions we make throughout life. I mean, that's something that just fascinates me as a person and as a writer. And so I kind of that's kind of what I wanted to explore, a human psyche as it breaks, and then also explore, because this is a woman who comes to us, you can tell she was breaking from before, which is why we go back to her childhood occasionally and see where that came from. Maybe she's had a privileged upbringing, but she's had a tough childhood because basically nobody seemed to love her. She didn't seem to love herself. Nobody taught her any emotional tools whatsoever. So she doesn't know how to love. She doesn't know how to love herself, and she's always in competition with other women constantly. So I don't know. I just wanted to create a psychology and explore it and pick at it and see how it could break slowly with the help of what I think is a real illness this woman has. I'm not a professional, but I think she should be diagnosed with something a little bit, I didn't want to, because I also didn't want to limit myself. So I didn't want to diagnose her 100%, because I wanted to have the freedom to, as you said, blur whatever I wanted to blur and play around without having the rules of symptoms of a specific illness. But I did want to make clear to the reader from the very beginning, this is a woman who's not well. This is a woman who's not going to end well. And she's broken and she's breaking even more. And she's just going to explode, I guess. I think that's what I wanted to achieve. And just what you were saying about tension, I just love, I wanted the reader to leave with a feeling of a little bit of anxiety, because I think for me as a reader, I admire the writers most when they leave me with a negative feeling instead of a positive feeling, weirdly. So if a book makes me laugh, that's great, and I'll probably I'll love it and I'll remember the book probably. But if it makes me feel afraid, if it makes me feel anxious, if it makes me feel bad, I will love it forever. And I'm a very disturbed person, but I don't know, there's something about the power of literature making you feel bad that I think is even more incredible than a book making you feel good. So I wanted to set out as a writer and explore bad feelings.
I think it's cathartic. So yeah, I completely get what you're saying, especially since there is this voyeuristic feeling while you watch her degrade and watch the insides of her mind. And I just wanted to ask you if you did some research on this without actually putting your finger on her illness. Because it's obvious that she's suffering from something, but at the same time, everybody is suffering from bits of what she's suffering, especially since we enjoy seeing her suffering. And that is something which dawns on us halfway through, I think. It's like, wait a minute. I like that she's going through all this. I like that she's imagining things.
Yeah.
I like that she's,
There's
planning.
something very human about it. Yeah, it's kind of gossipy almost, like we're her neighbors and we want to throw garbage at her. I think the third person narration helps, because usually with these thrillers, it's usually the first person, so you can't help but to empathize and just go completely inside. But I think the third person that I wanted to do it that way, to have a bit of distance, so that it also felt like the narrator was kind of laughing at her, so we could all laugh at her together behind her back. Again, I'm disturbed. But yeah, I did diagnose her. I did do research into schizophrenia. And so I did put in some, some things that I learned, that I read about in some case text, something about, for example, there was a study that I read about how some scientists thought that maybe developing schizophrenia had something to do with having been malnourished as a fetus in the womb. So if the mother wasn't eating properly or food wasn't properly reaching the fetus, that might have something to do with it. So that's why I mentioned something about Mrs. March's mother being extremely thin when she's pregnant with Mrs. March. So, and those kinds of, I also read some studies about schizophrenia flaring up during menopause and early menopause, which is what Mrs. March seems to be going through, because she has some symptoms of early menopause. So I did pepper it through. I just didn't want to state it outright, because I'm not a professional. I didn't want to limit myself plot wise, but I did think that maybe she could be schizophrenic. And since I've talked to some mental health professionals, and she's had quite a few different diagnoses. One of them, I talked to a psychiatrist who told me she would diagnose her as schizophrenic. But then another one told me she diagnosed her with multiple personality. So that was interesting as well. So she's even complex to the psychiatrists.
So you try to diagnose her. You created several characters within Mrs. March, not just herself.
I mean, yeah. I mean, don't we all have quite a few people inside? We're not the same person in front of our mom or in front of our children or in front of our friends. Sometimes it feels like we're completely different people. But then, it's a different thing if you black out and then start speaking another language. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, so I think Mrs. March, apart from her possibly being schizophrenic, I think she's just a very obsessive, very jealous, and very anxious person, and very insecure. And she's always following her worst feeling. Like, she's always listening to her worst instincts, I feel like, instead of trying to be a better person or not hurt other people or try to think about the consequences of her actions. She's always following her worst instincts to think evil of others and to think that everything is a conspiracy against her. And she never thinks that maybe this is a little bit her fault. So yeah, I hate that about her.
Did you ever feel bad about her? Meaning, feel a bit guilty that you present her as she is, without any safety net, let's say,
without any redeeming qualities. I feel kind of bad. I feel sorry. I was torturing her a lot, but I also felt like I gave her a lot of chances. That's why there are so many mirrors in the book. There's the mirror symbolism is really big and repetitive, and it's when I'm always trying to put Mrs. March in front of a mirror, have her look at her reflection, but she's always finding ways to not look at herself, right? So she sees other women in the mirror, she sees different reflections, she sees her reflection, but it's doing something different, or she takes a bath so that the bathroom will fill up with steam and she won't see her reflection. So she's always fleeing from her. She doesn't want to look at herself, she doesn't want to see herself. So so I gave her many chances and she just refused, so I had to torture her. It wasn't my fault, it was her fault. I was writing well, you brought this on yourself. So but I do, of course, and I feel you have to empathize a little, especially when I was writing her as a child and thinking about living in such a cold and hospitable environment and cannot, and your mother punishing you in very subtle passive aggressive ways and never explaining to you that of course, I'd have to be a psychopath, I think, not to feel a little bit sad. But it's interesting how, and I think it depends on each reader, to what point you justify her actions by the end of the book, by claiming that she had an unhappy childhood. You know, when does it is at some point, maybe it comes to a point where it's not
an excuse anymore.
Yeah, you can't justify, you can't redeem her. So I think I didn't want to send like a message. I just wanted to explore it, and for the reader to ask themselves, you know, when they would have forgiven her, up to what point, if they do forgive her, if they don't, if they empathize, if they don't. And I think it's really interesting that each person has a different level of patience for her.
Well, it seems like you put up quite a fight with her, and the characters usually have a will of their own, meaning that I suppose there were times when you thought, oh, she's not doing what I want her to do. She's putting up resistance. Did you feel like the book might have had another turn if you didn't master her or rein her in? Because it seems like in certain moments of the book, or at least this is my perception, that she said, no, listen, I know what you intend to do with me, but I'm going that way. So you had to reorganize and rearrange the plot according to her.
That's interesting. I'd like to think she has that much power over me. I don't know, but then it's a very meta thing we're talking about, because she's me, obviously, but I don't think she had, because, well, yes and no, because sometimes I think I wanted her to, maybe the opposite of what you said. I wanted her to do something, and to kind of, for it to be a bit more, maybe take action and something to happen, because the book is quite slow. It's quite a slow burning sort of a thriller. And she refused. And she just, because the tension and the rhythm was really important. It had to be very contained, and it had to be very slow. So I think sometimes I'd be screaming at her to do something. Like eventually she gets the plane to Maine, something like that, like go do something, or go talk to your husband, or slap him in the face, or I don't know, break something. And she wouldn't. She was contained. She didn't want to. So I think it's usually the opposite. Like writers talk about their characters coming to life and doing all of these things and acting, you know, and action-packed, taking cars to destination. And mine was like, I want to stay in bed smoking. She didn't want to get up. She didn't want to do the work, you know.
So she was doing things her own way. But
because she wasn't. Yeah, I guess. But I'm a controlled writer, so I wasn't gonna let her get out of control, I think. Because I'm a little bit Mrs. March myself, I guess.
Well, I was wondering some time back, what would happen if the characters would start writing their writers? Meaning, just also because there's this metaphor in your book, her husband is a writer, and that's on purpose. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So it's like it's a mise en abîme. It's this layer on top of another layer, and so on of things that go inside her, inside the book, inside the writing process.
Right. Yeah.
And the mirrors reflect that
again. I was gonna say it's another reflection. It's another mirror. Exactly. Although, to be fair, I also the writer, because I wanted her husband. Well, the plot came to me because it had to be somebody who had written a book. And possibly based a character on her. So he had to be a writer, but also I wanted to be a writer. I was starting to be a writer, and I felt like it was a job that I could guess, even though I wasn't a writer yet, but I could kind of guess what it was about. You know, I couldn't write about like an electronical engineer. I would probably commit suicide because I have no clue what the hell I was talking about. So it was also my way of cheating my way into this book without doing too much research. You can tell I didn't want to do like the research on I didn't want to
you didn't want to do the work like Mrs. March didn't want to get out the bed.
I'm realizing I'm not looking good in this interview, but I just
no, it's not
my way out of doing any research. It was my first book, so
yeah. But as I was saying, quite a feat, and you will have to produce. I'm sure that you'll write many books, and they are all going to be great because you have this knack of building tension. And I don't know what you're writing right now, if it's another psychological thriller or a thriller.
Yeah, it's dark. I mean, it's I wouldn't know how to categorize it yet, and it's very, because it's still a baby, but it's dark. It's dark, yeah, and it has humor as well. I think those are two qualities that I really like, that I'm always going to love: just darkness and humor at the same time.
Well, I appreciated very much the link with Daphne du Maurier.
Yeah,
she's a writer I really loved, especially as a teenager, and I still think that she's very strong, and also a very good influence for many writers and for Hitchcock himself. And,
and her short stories are really upsetting.
Indeed,
weird. I love. There's so many great women writers who, in their short stories, I feel like especially, they go all out with the darkness. Even like Patricia Highsmith has the most upsetting, macabre short stories I've ever. I feel like guilty when I'm reading them, like, because I feel bad because they're so disturbing. And Tessa Moshfegh has some of the most amazing short stories. And there's so much. Shirley Jackson was a huge influence as well, in all of her short stories about women, housewives, and mirrors and reflections, and not recognizing themselves in the mirror, or not recognizing their husband when he comes back from a trip. I love them. And Daphne du Maurier is one of them, for sure.
Yeah, and of course, with all this cinematic setup, your book is going to be turned into a movie soon, I suppose. And you're writing the script, right? With Elizabeth Moss.
Right.
Wanted to. Is she going to star herself as Mrs. March in the film? Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, she wanted to play Mrs. March. She really liked the character, I think, and I think she would be amazing. I love how Elizabeth Moss has. I think she's one of the best actresses nowadays, because she's so. I don't know how to say this, but she gets into such a weird place, and I mean this in the best way. I love weird, but like sometimes her choices on like delivery of lines are not the ones you would expect. Like sometimes anybody else would be screaming a line, but she's whispering it, or the opposite. Maybe she's screaming and like spit is coming out and she doesn't care, or like, her makeup is like running down her face and saliva and down her chin, and she's just like it's like watching an animal with like a raw instinct. So I would love to see her. I'm gonna love it to see her as Mrs. March and just go all out and go psycho. I think she's gonna have fun with it.
Well, I didn't know about the deal with Elizabeth Moss when I was reading the book, and the first image I had was of Olivia Colman.
Oh, that's amazing! I love it.
I thought she would play. I mean, the scene with the gloves. I could see her doing this with the gloves all the time. So, like,
Olivia Colman would be amazing. My only question is whether she'd be just too lovable, because you just want to hug. I want to hug her, but then I'm thinking of her in The Favorite, where she was really.
Indeed, so, yes, she can be obnoxious as a character, as an actress.
She can do anything, but I just want to hug her so bad. I want her to be my friend forever. So I don't know. She'd just be too lovable. We'll see. If Elizabeth doesn't want to do it, we can.
You can hire Olivia Colman. But anyway, Mrs. March is lovable too, to some extent. Sure. She's human after all, and.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on each reader. Some readers really, really hate her, and others really defend her and think that everything is her husband's fault. So that's interesting as well. What each person. Did you empathize with her a lot? Or
I do actually. It's not that type of book, whodunit or who's the culprit. It's not about finding the culprit here. It's more about having pity. But for yourself as well, because I suppose when you hate someone or hate some features of a character, it's because you identify with them. So
that's interesting.
It's like in real life, when something annoys you in somebody else, it's usually because you recognize something that you have in yourself. And it's like a coping mechanism. I hate it because actually I can't stand to see it in the mirror effect. as you
yeah,
said.
again, that's true. And that's part of why I wrote her the way I wrote her. Because a lot of, as I said, some qualities that I really dislike in myself, blown out of proportion, and then not giving her any of the qualities that I am proud of myself for, like sense of humor or, self-criticism or whatever. So yeah, there's absolutely what you're saying. And it was more, and what you said is interesting, because I set out to write a thriller, but not a whodunit. I think there was a bit of a manipulation on my end, because I put in, there is a crime. The body of a young woman appears and her husband has been in the area. So did he do it? Did he not do it? But ultimately I was like, and this might be a bit of a spoiler, you can cut this out, but I wanted it to be like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's not what matters. What matters are people and human beings and how their mind works. And those kinds of cases they're never even solved in real life, right? Like, what happened to Madeleine McCann? I still want to know what happened to the woman on the staircase.
Yes.
We're never going to find out. So that's not real life. That's not what matters. What matters is Mrs. March. And that was the mystery that I wanted to solve, not the crime, not the obvious, not the glamorous, young, beautiful, raped, murdered girl, which is always the ones who, they're always the ones that people are interested in, aren't they? But
it's also very interesting to see what's happening inside people's minds. And this is part of the fascination we have with the modern novels, and especially with the psychological thrillers, because they move the accent from what's happening, from the action, from the truth of what's happening, as you were saying, facts, to the inner life and all the processes. And it's much more interesting for me to know how she's fantasizing about, I don't know, putting arsenic in people's plates or whatever, seeing cockroaches in her apartment and things starting changing shapes and so on.
What this woman is, what she's feeling and thinking. Because I also saw that there was this fashion that was developing with these thrillers where the main character is always a woman who has gone through some trauma, and so she's flawed, allegedly, but she's always a really great woman who is amazing and saves everybody and finds out what's happening before the police, and nobody believes her, and she's always drinking. There was like a very specific silhouette of a character that was forming with these novels, and I kind of wanted to pee on that a little bit as well and create a really flawed bitch of a character, where she's like, where it's just like, there's no way that we can justify this bitch. She's like, we don't like her at all.
And yet she's not a true villain.
She's not even good at that, right?
Yes. Well, she's a regular person fantasizing to be evil while trying to be good. Let's put it this way.
I think she thinks that she's being great. I think she thinks that she's a hero, but she's not really. And also, and also not everything is the fault of the man in this case, because that was another stereotype maybe that was blossoming, where all these women, everyone thought they were crazy, but then it turned out they were right, and the man was making them, they're gaslighting them, or it was the man's fault, or the man was always poking at them. And I wanted to create a woman who was just doing this.
Well, at the same time, there's also the other stereotype that women like her, in her, I don't know, what is she, in her 40s, 50s, almost 50s, are mentally unbalanced. They suffer from something. So it's like women are usually more vulnerable to such things, psychologically speaking, and that's not true, because there are also many men.
Sure.
Absolutely. Who are not right in their heads as well.
Well, but also when the women, because you said she's not a villain, but I'm thinking even the female villains that we have nowadays are still they're still beautiful. Usually, for example, I'm thinking of like Cersei Lannister, I'm thinking of Cruella, Maleficent. I mean, Angelina Jolie, Emma Stone, they look beautiful. They wear beautiful dresses, and they have beautiful hair. They're very stylish. So I don't know, couldn't we have like like a
witch.
loser, you know what I mean? Yeah,
like a true witch.
You know, cracked hands, dry hands, badly manicured, jealous bitch, you know, to kind of dissect
a wart on the nose and so on.
Not perfect all the time, and with qualities that nobody, because you kind of can't help but admire. You know, I saw Cruella, and then I came out of the movie theater wanting to be Cruella. I wanted to be her. I wanted to act like her. I wanted to look like her. I couldn't help admiring her because she was a badass. And I think we still kind of even admire those. I wanted to create a character that was not, that you didn't want to, that you really didn't like, that you didn't want to be like. You wanted to, you know, you wanted to avoid her, and you wouldn't have liked her in real life at all, and you wouldn't want, nothing to admire, I guess.
So that was your purpose, to write about someone who is completely bad or flawed, or
not because it's not a, you know, she's not like an evil Disney villain. Because she's not even good at that, is what I mean. Like even those villains are cool, or you know, a lot of people aspire to be, I don't know, as badass as Cersei, or as sarcastic, or as smart, or whatever. It's like, no, she's just meh. She's just, I think that's the worst thing you can be nowadays. I think maybe is boring, or just
in between.
Average, mediocre. She's not good at anything. She doesn't have any talent. She's not a great dresser.
Well, yet she's witty, and she's funny, and she has quite a lot of imagination.
That's me, not her. That's the narrator. That's not. So yeah, you do redeem her. Yeah, but I don't know. I find those areas of gray much more interesting, and obvious talent and obvious beauty, and it's more fun to play around with.
Yeah. Well, and yet she comes from a very sheltered background. So she lives in the Upper East Side, and she's actually, this allows her to act as she acts, or to have so much time as to fantasize instead of acting, and to spend her time in bed smoking, as you say, instead of I don't know, doing something real, which would keep her grounded.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, it's like the meme, right? Like first world problems, I guess. If she had some real problems in life, some stuff to deal with, then she wouldn't have time for all this. But at the same time, there are also, you know, people from privileged backgrounds who don't act this way, and who do, and who have a lot of talents and hobbies and passions, and help other human beings, and they're not terrible parents like she is. So I don't think that, you know, I don't think you can blame it all on her privileged upbringing.
Well, let's have an exercise of imagination. If you met her in the street, or I don't know, in a park or in a patisserie, would you say something to her? I mean, knowing her, recognizing her. Oh, this is Mrs. March. I wrote about
my creation.
What would be your first line to her? I mean, just knowing all her vulnerabilities and what she might think of you, and just to put her at ease, or how to start a dialogue with your own character.
That's so interesting. I'd probably be embarrassed for her. So I wouldn't want to, you know, I'd avoid her, like, and I wouldn't go up to her. But if I did go up to her, I think I'd try to lower her walls first, so that she felt safe. And I think with her, she's in constant competition with every woman she ever meets, even if it's a 10-year-old girl. So I'd probably try to insult myself, so that she would lower her walls, so that she knew that it wasn't a competition and she was safe. And I'd start by embarrassing myself in front of her, so she could chill and know that she is superior. And then I would kill her. No, I'm kidding. You know, kindly try to claw my way in and give her some advice, maybe, but she wouldn't take it. And she would never show herself to anybody, I think. So it would be really difficult. So I think, and it would also depend if I want to be this person's friend, or if I want to avoid her, which is probably what I would do, because I don't like her very much. So I'd probably I'd just be too embarrassed to tell her anything. But the way into her heart is by embarrassing yourself first.
Okay, so you sound like her therapist now, and that's good. So there's hope.
Maybe that's a terrible idea. I don't know. I mean, she'd probably be in prison at this point, so I would have the upper hand.
So what's your next book about, if you can tell us a few words about it?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I can, but because not even my agent has read it. But I can say it's not. It just has nothing to do with Mrs. March. And
well, you can tell us and then kill us, and that would be okay.
I wish I could.
Thank you.
You're far away. No, nothing to do with Mrs. March. So it's not. None of the characters, none of the storyline, nothing like that. It's a whole different thing. But as I said, it's dark, but I think it's pretty funny. But I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's terrible, and they'll never publish it. So I'll let you know because nobody has read it yet. So I don't know how that's gonna go. Very, 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 very violent. I think it's pretty violent and sarcastic.
It's very violent. It's okay.
There's some graphic violence in it. Yep.
Well, you mentioned a word which is quite interesting, weird. So writing about weird people or weird stuff, this has been a long time taboo. We don't have to emphasize this. I mean, you either have to write about very bad characters who have to be punished somehow, or very good characters who have to be rewarded or given an example or something. But weird is in between, and weird is something which is kind of not even average. It's very special to be weird, but and it doesn't fall into any category. You can't pigeonhole weird.
Exactly.
And I think this is the beginning of a very interesting type of literature, to write about weird stuff in a very common way. Meaning like, okay, this is weird, and so what? It's like maybe you are interested, and you are interested. And that's the fascination.
I like that. I like that you're saying that maybe this is the beginning of a very weird career.
Not yours, in general. I mean, the beginning of a literary strain.
Which is very, it's great, isn't it? Because it'll surprise you, and you always learn more from weird, I think. But a friend told me, I think he said something like, you write things that are really weird, but you write them in a realistic way.
Exactly. Yes, in a down to earth way.
I'm right now starting a love affair with weird literature, because for the longest time I only read, and I am ashamed of this now, because I only read a more like typical commercial stuff. I'm talking about like through college or whatever, and I read a lot of classics and stuff, but it's only recently that I've started to get into weirder literature, and I love it so hard and so much. I'm having so much fun, and I'm learning so much as a writer, just from I don't know, Carmen Maria Machado, and the way she plays with structure and genre, and Tessa Moshfegh, as we mentioned, she makes the weirdest characters ever. I love it. And some of her books, I don't even know what genre they are. And and Mariana Enriquez. I mean, these are just I'm really leaning into the weirdness that is happening in literature right now, and I'm loving it. So I hope that I can write some weird stuff in the future as well. I'd love to, because I love to read it. So
so as a reader, it's interesting to be able to enter that area without feeling guilty or ashamed or whatever. Oh, I shouldn't be here.
Right. Or this is going to be boring, or this is going to be too intellectual. I think what I used to think when I didn't read this kind of literature, I read the typical kind of books, was that I was going to feel bored or intimidated by it, because it was going to be too smart, or I wasn't going to get it, or, it was just going to be too unsettling in a weird way that I didn't understand. And it's not true. It's just books. Books are great. Whatever the book, it's fine. Whatever you want to read is
well, it's true. I keep saying this, that the first reason one should read is for entertainment, because entertainment is very good. It's like, it's not like we are thinking less of education or of gathering
Right.
information.
You have to know how to perform surgery, on a brain. And there's, I mean, I don't know, but I think there's only one way to do it. But reading, you can just, I don't think there should be anything, there shouldn't be any guilty pleasures in reading. I think any type of literature that you enjoy reading, you should never feel guilty about whatever it is. Maybe Mein Kampf, but like, you know what I mean? Not
well,
like,
yeah, indeed. Or
not, I don't know. Just read it, whatever. It's a book.
Well, let's say that reading that would be for other purposes, like information or critique or research.
Yeah, getting ready for the future.
Yeah, reading Mein Kampf for entertainment, that would be quite disturbed.
That would be interesting. That would be, I'd like to be that person. I'm gonna read it now.
No, it's fun. It's like kind of dark humor that you have in writing and in person, as I was saying. Yes, well,
that's a defense mechanism. I'm so nervous all the time. I'm just making inappropriate jokes.
Well, it's also the times are making us very nervous, and it's like I think that. Even the setup nowadays accentuates this feeling and maybe makes you write something different, or maybe there's going to be a shift in the way people write about what people write and how they perceive their own mental issues or mental landscape. Since from the beginning of the pandemic, we had so much time to look at ourselves and we keep avoiding that.
Reflecting,
yes.
Anxiety, and modern.
There's no mirror behind you. I was trying to search for the mirror.
Maybe it's all a mirror. Maybe this isn't even here. Maybe I.
But the lady behind you looks a bit like Mrs. March.
She is Mrs. March.
Yeah. She is Mrs. March. Oh,
yeah,
okay. Hello.
That's a painting. Yeah, my brother-in-law painted that for me, and that's his version of Mrs. March. Yeah,
quite a haunting gaze she has. So,
yes, and very judgmental.
Oh,
through the watercolor. Yeah. I love that.
And that's mini Mrs. March. Mrs. March when she was a child, or it's an Egyptian
That's
child.
an Egyptian. Mrs. March wishes. Mrs. March wishes she was that. Yeah, that's a mini. That's a little woman.
Well, it's quite revealing, the book, revealing for your talent, first of all, and revealing for what can happen inside of the mind when you have access to it. And I think that's the most important thing, that we keep saying that, no, they are characters, and I don't know, Emma Bovary, Anna Karenina are just characters, but they are based on people with real traits, and sometimes such characters are more real than the people you meet in the street, or I don't know, sometimes in your life as well. So
that's true.
So this thing
to analyze, I think, human trait, even if they're not real people. I think it's the act of dissecting and analyzing parts of a human mind is so interesting and fascinating to me anyway, even if the person doesn't exist. And I think it's good practice for real life as well, to empathize and to learn about different types of people. I mean, there's so much stuff that I've learned from books. And then people tell me amazed, like, did you know that, psychology says that? And it's like, yes, I knew that. I read that somewhere. So I think we practice on books before going out into the real world. Yeah.
So that's another reason for advocating reading anything. Just yeah. Well. Yep. Well, I look forward to your next book and to the film. Yeah. And, and also to meeting you in person. Maybe you will come to Bucharest to a festival.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love to. I've never been, and I mean, I'd love to, and I'd love to see La Limita in books.
Yes.
And meet my Romanian readers.
Well, speaking of which, do you have a message for them?
Yes. Hi. I don't know. I really hope you enjoy Mrs. March. I'm really excited that you can read Mrs. March and can comment on it. And if you don't like it, that's perfectly fine. But at least I hope that it will affect you in some way anyway, and that you'll kind of remember the feeling that it gave you when you read it. And I'm just really proud that that I could give you something, anything. I'm sorry you have to pay for it though.
Well, it's worth the price. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the interview and for having taken the time to talk to me and to talk to your readers, Romanian readers.
Thank you.
And hopefully very soon we'll have another interview about your next book.
Oh, I hope so. It's going to be a weird one though.
Well, we're used to it now and we like it, so it's okay. Well, we can't expect anything less than that.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye. See you. Bye-bye.